The wind tore across the endless plains like a restless spirit, carrying dust, sagebrush, and the faint, unsettling scent of smoke. The sun hung low behind the jagged ridges, casting a bruised orange glow over the vast land. On the horizon, a lone rider appeared, a tall, broad-shouldered shadow against the dying light. His name was Eli Turner. Once a man of promises, he was now a man running from them, riding with a heart heavy with memories and regrets. Years ago, Eli had promised Margaret, a young widow, that he would never return to the Turner Ranch, to her or to her boy, Samuel. He had sworn it with the full weight of his heart. But he had left, driven by a deep-seated fear, by the mistakes of a lifetime, believing his absence was the only way to keep them safe. The image of Margaret's tear-streaked face haunted his every waking moment. The desperation in her eyes, the unspoken pleas of a mother who had come to rely on him. His tired horse trudged across the rocky terrain, its hooves striking sparks from the flinty ground. His coat, once clean and new, was now frayed and caked with the dust of a dozen different towns. His hat shadowed eyes that had seen far too much grief. He had wandered aimlessly, from one place to the next, hiding from a past he could not face and from the man he had become. But tonight, the horizon carried a new scent, one that cut through the dust and sage. Smoke. At first, it was just a wisp, curling lazily into the twilight sky. But it thickened quickly, growing heavy with the acrid smell of burning timber and hay. A cold knot tightened in his stomach. The Turner Ranch, it was burning. Panic, sharp and clawing, rose in his throat, but he did not hesitate. He spurred his horse onward, the sound of pounding hooves echoing across the plains. He was driven now by something stronger than fear, a powerful mix of love, guilt, and the desperate need to protect what little he had left in this world. The flames rose hungrily against the darkening sky, consuming the barn and the main house. Sparks flew into the air like a swarm of fireflies caught in a violent storm. Memories of Margaret and Samuel crashed into him, sharp and relentless. He had thought his absence would be a shield, but now he saw it had only left wounds, perhaps deeper than he could ever repair. He pushed forward through the choking smoke and blistering heat, his heart hammering against his ribs, his eyes stinging. And then he saw him. A small figure near the edge of the roaring barn, a boy, huddled on the ground, trembling. Relief and terror collided in his chest. Samuel. Eli's boots felt like they were melting against the hot earth as he rushed forward, scooping the child into his arms. The boy clung to him, his small face streaked with soot and tears. "Eli?" Samuel whispered, his voice weak and uncertain. It's all right, Samuel. "I've got you," Eli said, his own voice raspy as he pressed the boy tightly to his chest. He carried him away from the inferno, toward a nearby creek, a trail of smoke curling behind them. Samuel's small hands gripped his coat, refusing to let go. "Mama?" the boy asked, his voice barely audible above the crackling fire. "I don't know, son. I don't know," Eli admitted, and the words tore at him. He had no idea where Margaret was, and the thought of her suffering weighed on him more than the fire ever could. But he held Samuel close, a silent vow forming in his heart. He would protect this boy. He would do what he had failed to do all those years ago. From the distance came the sound of galloping horses and urgent shouts. Other ranchers, neighbors, had seen the blaze and were rushing to help. Eli's chest tightened. He had returned, yes, but not as the man who left. He was a man facing the consequences of his own cowardice, a man who might finally have a chance to make things right. Yet beneath the fear, a fragile hope glimmered, as faint as a candle flame in the wind. Then, a sound pierced the night, a sharp, desperate cry. Eli froze, his heart hammering. Samuel squirmed in his arms, his wide eyes following the sound. Without a second thought, Eli turned and ran back toward the smoke, back toward the very heart of the fire. He had promised never to return. And yet, here he was, plunging headfirst into the past he could never truly escape. Flames roared around him, consuming the Turner Ranch and all that he had left behind. The smoke stung his eyes, and the intense heat pressed against his face, but he pushed forward. Every step, every ragged breath, was a choice to face the mistakes, the guilt, and the love that still bound him to this land and to this family. As the night fell and the wind howled across the charred plains, Eli ran unflinching, unbroken, determined to save those who still remained. The fire may have consumed the Turner ranch, but for Eli Turner, redemption was no longer just a choice. It was the only path forward. And as he vanished into the heart of the blaze, a question hung in the night air. Would he emerge as a savior, or would the past finally claim him, just as it had threatened to claim everything he ever loved? The fire roared like a living beast, swallowing the Turner ranch and the night around it. Eli's lungs burned with smoke, his boots sinking into scorched earth as he carried Samuel through the chaos. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back to flee, but he couldn't. Not now. Not when the flames had already claimed so much, and when the desperate cries from inside the house hinted at those still trapped. Samuel clung to him, his small hands tightening with each step. The boy's trust was a fragile thing, built on faint memories of a man who had once left without any warning. Eli whispered words of comfort, his own voice trembling. "We're almost safe, son, just hold on, just a little further." But inside, a cold doubt gnawed at him. He had promised himself he'd never return to this place, to this life. And now, here he was, breaking that promise in the most dangerous way imaginable. Through the thick, swirling smoke, Eli saw movement, a shadow by the burning barn. His heart leapt. He raced forward, dodging fallen beams and a shower of sparks that danced like angry fireflies. There, pinned under a collapsed roof beam, was an older man, the ranch foreman, Mr. Hawks, groaning in pain. "Eli, help!" The man gasped, his voice raspy and weak. Without a second of hesitation, Eli gently set Samuel down on a patch of clear ground. He ran to the foreman, his muscles straining as he lifted the heavy, smoldering beam just enough for the man to pull himself free. Mr. Hawks coughed violently, smoke blackening his face, but he managed a weak nod of thanks. "Get the boy out!" Hawks rasped, his eyes wide with urgency. "Get him to safety!" Eli scooped Samuel back into his arms. The fire was growing more intense now, its fiery tongues licking at the edges of the main house. Eli's chest burned, and for a fleeting moment, the thought of turning away, of just running to safety, crossed his mind. But then he heard a faint, desperate cry carried on the wind. It was a woman's voice. It was Margaret. Fear and hope collided in his chest like two warring armies. He had imagined her safe, perhaps having moved on, gone elsewhere. But the sound of her calling his name, her voice twisted in pure panic, brought a sudden, sharp clarity to his purpose. He ran toward the sound, smoke stinging his eyes, the flames casting eerie, dancing shadows across the scorched walls. Each step felt like it took a lifetime, every single breath a desperate battle. He burst through the smoke-filled doorway of the main house and found her. Margaret was trapped under a fallen beam near the kitchen, her arms stretched toward him. "Eli," she cried, her eyes wide with a mixture of relief and utter disbelief. Years of fear and loneliness seemed to flash across her face in that single moment, and a wave of guilt crashed over Eli. He had left her, left Samuel, and now she was seeing him return at the very moment that could have destroyed them all. "I'm here, Margaret." "I've got you!" Eli shouted, his voice cracking. He summoned every ounce of strength he had and lifted the massive beam. The fire's intense heat licked his face, and a gritty paste of sweat and ash coated his skin, but he held firm. He could see the terror in Margaret's eyes, and he felt it deep in his soul, the weight of all the years he was absent. The crushing fear of losing everything, the sharp pain he had caused. Yet in that instant, as he helped her to her feet and carried her out into the night, there was no room for regret. There was only action, only survival. Outside, the other ranchers were rallying, their figures silhouetted against the inferno. Horses whinnied in panic, and the thick smell of smoke mixed with sweat and adrenaline. Eli set Margaret down carefully. She immediately pulled Samuel close, holding him as though he were the only solid thing left in the world. For a brief, fragile moment, father, mother, and son embraced amidst the ruins, surrounded by fire and darkness. It was a fleeting reunion, but profound. As the night deepened and the chaos began to subside, Eli finally stepped back and took in the sheer scale of the destruction. The barn was gone, reduced to a pile of glowing embers. The house smoldered, a skeletal frame against the dark sky. The land that had been the thriving Turner Ranch was now scarred beyond recognition. Yet despite all the ruin, something remained unbroken: family. Margaret's eyes met his, a complex storm of anger, relief, and disbelief swirling within them. "Why? Why now, Eli? After all these years?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Eli's chest tightened. "I left to protect you," he said, his voice low and raw. "I thought I was doing the right thing. But leaving hurt more than I ever realized. I ran, yes, I was a coward, but I'm here now. And I won't leave again." For a long, silent moment, Margaret said nothing, only held Samuel closer, her knuckles white. The night was silent except for the distant crackle of the dying fire. And then, quietly, she nodded. It was the smallest movement, but in it was the faintest flicker of returning trust. But not all wounds were so easily healed. The past had left deep marks, and secrets had festered in the long years of Eli's absence. He knew that earning true forgiveness would take much more than a single heroic act in a fire. As the first embers began to fade into smoke, a new tension settled over the scorched land. From the edge of the property, dark figures appeared, riders emerging from the shadows. They were strangers, and they were armed, their eyes fixed intently on the surviving Turner family. Eli's gaze hardened. Just when they thought they were safe, danger had found them again. He clenched his fists, the full weight of responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. He had returned, broken promises and all, to face the flames and save his family, but the frontier was merciless. And sometimes the fire outside was nothing compared to the fire that waited in men's hearts. Eli instinctively tightened his grip on Samuel's small shoulder and moved to stand between his family and the approaching riders. He could feel the heat of the past, the crushing weight of years of mistakes, pressing down on him. But for the first time in a long, long time he felt ready not to run, not to hide, but to stand and fight for what mattered most. The distant riders drew closer, their silhouettes growing larger against the moonlit horizon. The wind seemed to carry the scent of danger, and the night was suddenly alive with a new kind of uncertainty. Margaret clutched Samuel, her body trembling, but her expression resolute. Eli's jaw was set like stone. He had returned, and now there was no turning back. The Turner family had survived the fire, but it was clear the frontier had more trials waiting for them. The shadows moved against the starlit sky, and Eli knew that survival here required more than just courage. It required a reckoning with the past, and a fight for the future. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to follow for more. The night hung heavy over the Turner ranch, the distant stars barely visible through a haze of smoke and ash. Nearby, the figures of approaching riders were growing clearer. Eli Turner stood at the forefront, a living barrier between his family and the unknown threat. The weight of years of mistakes pressing down on his shoulders. He had returned. The riders drew closer, and in the faint moonlight, Eli could see the hard lines of their faces, the glint of weapons. He did not flinch. Beside him, Margaret held their son, Samuel, whose small body trembled. Yet, the boy's eyes were fixed on the man who had returned when it mattered most. Eli's jaw tightened. He drew a deep, steadying breath. The fire had tested them, but it had not broken them. "Stay behind me," Eli whispered to Margaret, his voice low but firm. She nodded, clutching Samuel tightly. The riders reined in their horses, the sound of their hooves pounding in the sudden silence of the night. Eli met their gaze with unwavering resolve. One of them, the leader, spoke, his voice harsh and unfamiliar. "Turner." "Step aside." Eli's eyes narrowed. "No," he said simply. "Not tonight, not ever again." He shifted his weight slightly, his hand hovering near the revolver at his hip. The words were more than defiance. They were a declaration of what he had become, a man who could no longer run, who would fight for the family he had once abandoned. A tense moment stretched, the wind whipping around them, carrying the smell of smoke and dust. "We're not here to fight you, Turner," he said, his tone softening slightly. "But this land, it's worth more than you think. You're going to need allies." Eli studied them, his initial suspicion tempered by a flicker of relief. "Allies?" he asked cautiously. "Yes," the rider replied. "People who understand that this frontier is a harsh place. We came to test you, to see if the man who left is the same man who's willing to stay." Eli's gaze softened. He looked down at Samuel, then at Margaret, his heart aching with a love he had tried so long to deny. He realized in that moment that survival wasn't just about courage, it was about loyalty, about love, about the choices you make with your heart as much as with your hand. "Then stay close," Eli said quietly, his voice carrying a newfound authority. "We'll rebuild, together." As dawn began to creep over the horizon, the charred plains took on a new light. Smoke still rose in gentle spirals from the embers, but the ruins of the ranch seemed less menacing in the soft morning glow. Eli, Margaret, and Samuel stood together, facing the rising sun, their shadows long against the burnt earth. For hours they worked. Soon, neighbors began to arrive, their wagons laden with tools, lumber, and barrels of water. Words of encouragement mixed with the sound of gentle laughter, a sound that had been absent for far too long from the Turner ranch. Eli worked alongside them, his hands quickly becoming blistered and blackened with soot, but his heart felt lighter with every plank he laid, every nail he hammered into place. For the first time in years, he felt that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Later that day, as the work slowed and the sun began its descent, Margaret approached him. Her eyes, once filled with mistrust and sorrow, now held something softer, a recognition of his courage, his love, and the simple, powerful fact that he had returned when it mattered most. You didn't have to come back," she said quietly, brushing a smudge of ash from her hands. "I promised I wouldn't," Eli admitted, his voice low and heavy with the memory of that broken vow. "And I broke that promise, but leaving him, that would have been a lie too great to bear. I just couldn't do it." Just then, Samuel stepped forward, his small hands gripping the fabric of Eli's coat. "Papa?" he asked, his young eyes bright with a tentative, hopeful trust. Eli knelt, his weary body aching, and drew the boy into his arms, holding him close. "Papa," he whispered back, and in that single, simple word, the deep chasm between the past and the present was finally mended. As night fell once more, the three of them stood outside what remained of their home. The wind had softened, and now it carried the clean scent of pine and earth instead of smoke. Eli looked up at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to pierce the deepening darkness, and he allowed himself a rare moment of peace. He had returned. He had faced the flames of the fire and the ghosts of his past. And he had been forgiven not through words alone, but through action, courage, and love. Instead, it had forged something stronger in its wake, a family reunited, trust rebuilt, and the profound knowledge that while promises can be broken, true love always finds its way home. And there, in the quiet of that vast frontier night, Eli made a silent vow not to run again, not to hide from what mattered most, and to face every trial that lay ahead with courage, heart, and honor. The Turner Ranch would rise from the ashes, not just as a home, but as a testament to resilience, forgiveness, and the enduring power of redemption. Imagine them there, Eli standing tall, Margaret holding Samuel close, the first stars of the night sparkling above them. The horizon is wide and open, filled with the promise of a new dawn. And the story leaves us with a final, hopeful truth. Even after heartbreak, even after mistakes, love and courage can always bring us back to where we belong. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please consider liking the video and subscribing for more Tales of the Heart. We'll see you next time.